It's Magnolia season. This brings me a lot of happiness. These blooms mean winter is over and we have so many months ahead of us filled with beach days and long walks with picnics and evening barbecues and morning coffee on the porch. I always love seeing the magnolia trees blooming in my neighborhood, and I wanted to share a drawing video with you. I'm going to take this one at a little bit of a slower pace. Maybe you can draw along with me or just watch while you're creating your own art and we can just hang out for a bit. Whatever you choose to do, I'm happy you're here. So let's have a coffee and draw some magnolia blooms. I'm going to be using some Strathmore cold pressed watercolor paper here because I love the texture that it has, and I think the texture adds a bit of personality to my drawings. I also have a sketching pencil here and a kneadable eraser. They're my favorite because they erase the pencil lines without lifting away the ink. And finally, I have a Sakura of America fine tipped black micron pen in size 03. So let's start by sketching out a light, rough draft of our design. I'd like to draw one big open bloom and a few smaller closed blooms and maybe a bud or two. I'll start with a circle for the stamen of the flower and then extend some big petals out from the center point. I'm using the blooms as a reference while I draw, but don't worry if you don't have any on hand to study. You could follow along here with me or find some photographs online to sketch from. Basically, what I'm doing is just drawing the outline of the main shapes that I see and not adding any details in this step. I like to use this draft as a loose guide just to keep me on track when I work with pen, but I won't worry too much if I stray a bit from this original guide. You shouldn't either. I've layered in a few leaves behind the bloom, as well as extending out from the stem in a few places. And now we're ready to move on to inking the outline of this piece. I'm going to start by drawing the center of the magnolia. Have a closer look here. You can see the carpel sticking out tall and pointed from the very center of the stamen, and the stamen halo around it. We're going to draw it from directly above, so take a look here at how I'm going to create this part. We'll start with a small cluster of circles, which is the carpel from above. Just layer them together in the center circle we drew. Then we can start drawing the parts of the stamen all around them. For the stamen, I'm going to draw layers of these tiny, squiggly lines extending outwards from the carpel we just drew. I'm going to give some of them a slight curve and maybe keep some of them a bit more straight. Basically, I'm just going to keep layering them until the full circle is filled in. Once the stamen are drawn, I'm going to move on to outlining the petals, starting with the 2 folded petals on the left. Basically, I'm drawing the petal shapes, but instead of a curved tip, I'm adding a less rounded line on one edge that'll add an extra line or two underneath to create the look of a fold. You'll notice these folds a lot more once we add the detail lines in the next step of this drawing. So let's keep outlining the rest of these petals on this first bloom here, keeping the tips with a bit of a curved point to them and the base, where it meets the stamen, more narrow than the center part of the petal. We can then outline the bud and the smaller closed bloom, and then let's move on to the leaves. If you take a closer look at Magnolia leaves, you'll notice that they have a thick vein running down the center of the leaf with smaller veins extending outwards toward the edges. The edges of the leaves have some shape to them too, some dips and ridges. They're definitely not perfectly straight. Keep these things in mind when you're drawing the leaves. I like to start by drawing the main center vein of the leaf first, and then adding in the curved outer edges. Notice how I'm wiggling my pen a bit here when I draw the outer edges. This is to give the leaves a bit more of a lifelike feel. I'm adding a sort of upside down U shape to the base of the small blooms and bud here on the page, and then I'm going to connect these shapes back to the branch, which I'll outline next. This part isn't complicated. Just use a wiggly or imperfect line to outline either side of the branches we sketched out. And before we move on to adding our detail lines to these magnolia blooms, I want to erase any pencil lines. I don't like drawing over top of the pencil if I can avoid it, as this way your pens will last a lot longer. Now this part of the drawing is always my favorite. It's where the piece always really starts to come to life. We're going to start adding some details to the petals first by drawing some lines stemming from the center of the bloom or the base of the petals outwards. Some of the lines can extend with a broken line all the way to the top of the petals, but you'll want to keep the majority of the lines in the places you want to make it look like there is a shadow. So toward the center, and then some shorter lines around the outer edges will help make it look like the petals have a bit of a curve to them. On this second petal here, I've added some lines underneath the fold line to make it appear higher, like it's casting a shadow. Notice how I'm adding some broken lines and some lines that are taller and extend a bit past the bottom of the petal. I'm also making sure that there are a few light lines anywhere a petal is overlapping another one, again to create that look of a shadow being cast in those areas. I'm intentionally leaving white space in the petals. This helps create high points or areas where the petals appear to be catching more light, and it helps to make it look like the petals have a curve to them. So let's finish off by adding some quick, light lines to these last few petals of the main bloom, and then we can move on to the smaller bloom and the bud. They're going to be shaded in a similar way, with the majority of the lines concentrated toward the base or where you want to add the look of a shadow. So let's move on to the leaves. If you've watched my How to Draw Leaves video, you might remember the S-curve leaf. I'm going to use that same technique here, where we're going to draw a curved line that is shaped a bit like the letter S, hence the S-curve leaf, that extends from the center vein toward the outer edge. So draw a subtle S-curve that starts in the middle, stemming from the center vein outwards toward the edge. We're going to use this as a guide and continue filling in the rest of the lines for the veins running along the leaf with the same curve as this initial line. You can keep your curved lines solid or make some of them broken like I'm doing here, which just helps to add a bit of texture or depth within each leaf. Follow the curve of the lines and keep working your way down the length of the leaf until the entire side is filled in, and then we can work on the next side. Start again with a curved S-shaped line in the center and then fill in those lines following the same curve down the length of the whole side. Now we'll work through the rest of these leaves with the same technique until they're all filled in. One thing I want you to notice is how I'm placing the lines a bit closer together within the leaves than I did with the petals, and keeping them more concentrated or with less white space. This will help make them appear darker on the page and help to make the magnolia bloom stand out in contrast. Just a few more leaves to finish up here, and then we can add the final details to the branch or stem. Now on to the branch. I'm not doing anything fancy here to give this branch a bit of interest. I'm just adding some quick, short lines along the entire length, concentrating some of the lines to certain areas and leaving some spots with less or no lines at all to add a bit of texture. I'm just going to keep layering in some quick light lines until the branch appears a bit darker in some areas and looks like it has a bit of texture or shadows in some spots. You can play around here a bit and see what you like. It took me a minute to put my pen down here. I really was resisting the urge to add more details. I sometimes have to remind myself to practice a bit of restraint, that sometimes less is more. And really, I'm happy with how this piece looks right now. Texture in the stem, darker contrasting leaves, and full, rounded petals. If you made it this far in the video, I'd love it if you'd let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I hope you enjoyed drawing this magnolia with me today, and I hope you get to enjoy magnolia season in some special way. Until next time, bye-bye.